to click like, subscribe, the bell notification, and whatever else YouTube has you clicking on to support us. What's up, everyone? I'm the Kaiju no Kami from the Toku and Animation News Network here at Colorado Anime Fest 2025 with...
Hey everybody, it's Advent Nebula!
And we are interviewing...
Gil Asakawa.
For people who don't know who you are, what do you do?
I am primarily a writer. I speak a lot about Japan, Japanese culture, Asian American identity, but I was a music critic for many years and covered pop culture and the arts and for newspapers and magazines. So that's what I do.
For you as an academic, how do you approach outreaching to students about the topics of Japanese and Pacific Islander culture?
Well, it's, I'm not really an academic. I did used to work at the University of Colorado in the journalism department, but I'm a freelance writer now. I pick and choose who I want to write for and what I want to do. But outreach, I don't think is that much of an issue for either like the anime culture community or Japan or even the larger Asian or Asian American, because there's so much awareness and understanding and appreciation for especially Japanese culture, not just pop culture, but food. I write a lot about food. I've written a book about food, Japanese food. And you know, back when I was a kid, because I'm old, if you were Japanese or Japanese American, it wasn't like, unless you were in California, pretty exotic. You know, people weren't very familiar. People weren't, you know, the amount of anime that's available now didn't have. You know, there's no such thing as J-pop or K-pop back then. And so I used to get teased by kids who would say, "Oh, I bet you eat that raw fish stuff, sushi, ooh, gross." And you know, I swear to you, the grandkids of those bullies today are going out to the supermarket and buying lame sushi several times a week and feeling perfectly normal about it. And it didn't used to be the case. So there's this kind of ingrained interest now in our culture. Japanese American culture, Japanese food, Japanese pop culture, anime, actors, at a level that didn't used to exist.
Well, I remember when I was first, because I really got into anime during the late 90s when Sci-Fi Channel would air these movies. But growing up, I would watch Voltron and Robotech not knowing what they were.
Yeah.
And then Power Rangers came out. Well, first I got really into Japanese culture through Godzilla movies. And then Power Rangers came out. I was like, oh, well, this is clearly Japanese because you can see it's the same style of buildings they use in Godzilla movies. And everything just evolved from that everything I really related to was from the culture side.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's true. The stuff that was introduced early on wasn't familiar, and it's become familiar because it shows up in different iterations. I gave a talk yesterday about the history of Japanese pop culture in American mainstream culture, and I ended by saying the most famous Japanese is Godzilla. Because Godzilla's known all over the world, and just when you think Godzilla's kind of run his course,
-1 happens.
-1 happens.
You have 70 years of a continuous franchise that everybody is familiar with.
I know.
And it's something that people can connect on a level worldwide.
It's amazing, and really -1 was significant, not just because it's another Godzilla movie and it's really good, but it also showed kind of the end of World War II from the Japanese perspective.
Yeah, it touched on something we've never really seen much of outside of people like myself who like to immerse themselves into the history movies, because I'm a big fan of samurai films, not just Kurosawa, but also going through the entire line of the 70s and 80s. They're going into Pinky Violence, which is a subject of film and Japanese pop culture a lot of people are not into.
Yeah, well, there's, you know, it really is like when you look at Shogun and all the Emmys that it won. I mentioned that in my talk yesterday too, that Japanese culture is much more prevalent today, and it's becoming accepted in a way that, getting these awards, getting all these kind of accolades shows how mainstream my culture is. Because I was 8 years old when we moved from Japan. My family went from Japan to the U.S. and I like to say that in 3 weeks I learned every American cuss word and forgot a lot of my Japanese. Yeah, I would go around saying the F word in front of adults, so what is he saying? Why is he saying it? But that's switched around to where it's not so unusual to hear non-Japanese say Japanese words. The pronunciation might be a little funky, but it's fascinating to me, which is why I write these books about I wrote a history of being Japanese American. I wrote this history of Japanese food in America. It really is kind of a journey of becoming familiar when you've been exotic and unusual, and suddenly to be accepted as mainstream.
Is that what inspired you to write these books?
Yeah, the food one especially, because of my experience at being teased for eating something like sushi, to now where it's available everywhere across the country. And to know that for Chinese food, there are more Chinese restaurants in the United States than McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King combined. More Chinese restaurants. That means you can go to the middle of, small town Nebraska, Iowa.
I grew up in a small town here where we had Sammy Wong was the guy who ran almost all the Chinese restaurants in almost all the little small pocket towns between Denver and where I grew up.
And it's not always quote unquote authentic. It's appropriated, but it's still.
It really was, because he made it to the clientele of all those small towns.
Right, you adjust to the new clientele. In my book about food, which is called Tabemashou, Let's Eat, the tasty history of Japanese food in America, that's the one I'm giving tonight, by the way, at 7 o'clock, the talk. But I have a chapter on Benihana. And when I said I was going to write about Benihana, people like Japanese and Japanese Americans would say, Benihana, why do you want to write about that? I said, because they were super important, because it was the gateway drug for people in the Midwest to not be scared of Japanese food. It actually opened people's minds to the possibility of, hey, maybe Japanese food is pretty good.
Well, even back, my wife and I are originally from Buffalo, New York, and even back in Buffalo, I had this thing where I was like, I don't want to eat it. And then when we moved to Colorado, I became more open to trying. I actually fell in love with gyoza. That's my favorite thing ever. There was one Japanese restaurant that was in Aurora that would give you 16 gyoza in order. So I'm like, yes, I want the gyoza.
And every culture actually has dumplings.
Yeah.
A version of gyoza.
I can pretty much attest to that, because my aunt that married into my family is originally from Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, and it's I'm now seeing a perspective with Vietnamese cuisine getting more and more accepted across the country.
Absolutely.
Where it really wasn't. But for the last 15 years, now you're seeing pho restaurants pop up on every corner.
Yep. And they all have, pho 78, pho 79, pho 80.
Well, I saw the best thing online the other day said there should be a Vietnamese Italian blend, and it should be called Forget About It.
That actually is pretty brilliant. Somebody needs to do that. I have seen, Pho King, Rapidos, a food truck. Pretty good food truck, too.
I do know that food truck, and it is a really good food truck.
So, all of this is kind of a sign that America, the West, is becoming more open-minded about cultures. And frankly, this is a time when we need to think about that and embrace that, because there are forces in this country that are all about closing that mind up, and denying kind of the diversity that this country has been built on. And so I feel like the stuff that I write about, the stuff that I talk about, is super important, because it really is about being open-minded. I feel so strongly that Americans need to travel outside of America.
Oh, yes.
Americans need to go to Japan. They need to go to Vietnam. They need to go to other countries and other places and experience other cultures, because right now, man, we are being pushed to become closed-minded and to shut ourselves off and from the rest of the world, and I think that's a very dangerous position to take in this.
My aunt says I need to go see Vietnam, and she also says I need to go visit Bali.
Yeah, I would love to go to some of those places. I would still prefer to go to Japan first and foremost, so if I have a chance to travel someplace. But
I would love to see some of the old castles.
In Japan? Oh yeah. I've walked up and down some of those. There's a castle in Kumamoto, the home of Kumamon, the cutest mascot for any Japanese city. It's a bear, adorable bear, and his name is Kumamon. But they have a castle in Kumamoto that my family and I visited there because we have relatives in Kumamoto. And then like 6 months after we were there was a earthquake, fire, parts of the castle collapsed, and it's still just now being reopened. Parts of it are being reopened.
Well, I've always found it really interesting how each city and each prefecture has their own mascot to kind of bring in everybody to kind of see the sights.
Yeah, it's a very Japanese thing. I'm not sure how that started, but it's kind of connected to I think the anime kawaii culture of Japan, where you create these cute mascots to represent your city. I mean, we don't have that. We have mascots for like sports teams, but they're not all like cute and funny and adorable like the Japanese ones are. Kumamon is the most famous in Japan, but again, I think there's something about the culture in Japan that encourages thinking of kawaii or cute animals and creatures to represent you. And I don't know that like Studio Ghibli would have evolved the same way if it weren't for this culture. Certainly there's parts of Tokyo that totally feed on that, the fashion districts, where you have this kawaii culture of like women wearing maid costumes or little girl costumes.
I've seen pictures of my friends have been in Shinjuku where that is very big.
Yeah, oh yeah, Harajuku is a big hotspot for kawaii culture, and I don't see that I don't see it in like cities in Europe or even other cities like Hong Kong, or I don't see communities like that developing in other countries.
Now, in your books, so where can someone find your books, and is there a part of your book you are most proud about?
Amazon has both my books, which is first one's called Being Japanese American. It's a history of Japanese Americans through my experience being born in Japan and then moving to the U.S. Tabemasho, also available on Amazon, and it's that history of Japanese food. And again, there's no recipes in it. People always ask, are there recipes in it? No, it's actually almost like a memoir. It's Japanese food through my eyes, through my mouth, and growing up with my mom cooking, and then becoming a kind of a foodie cook. I love Japanese knives and I love cooking, and so it's kind of a memoir more than anything else. But I did a lot of research, and I am proud. I'm proud of learning where sushi came from, following the history of ramen, which started as a Chinese noodle dish in Yokohama, became popular in Japan, and then like a lot of things that the Japanese absorb, they take something that's foreign, curry, like ramen, like tempura, which is actually originally a Portuguese food, and making it completely Japanese. So I did a lot of research, and I am proud of that in Tabemasho.
Do you have any social media links the audience can find you at?
I am on Instagram, Facebook. I have a TikTok account, but I lurk more than post. And that's more out of like security reasons than anything else that I was concerned with. But Instagram and Facebook are where I post most of my stuff. I also have a YouTube account where I have posted videos in the past. So I'm out there. I'm available. If you Google me, I'm there.
And any final words for our viewers?
Well, I think being a fan of anime is important and it's special because, as I said, right now it's super important, I think, to build those bridges and embrace other cultures. And if nothing else, anime is this weird reflection of American culture through the Japanese filter. And for Americans, young and old, to take what the Japanese have created out of anime and to turn it around, absorb it, look at it, learn it, and learn from it the things that are Japanese. I think that's important right now.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Until next time, bye.